Okay, so in this section I'm going to run through the Curriculum for Wales guidance, in particular the first three boxes on the website: the Introduction to Curriculum for Wales guidance, the Summary of Legislation, and the Designing Your Curriculum section. That's one of four parts of the introductory guidance, the fourth of which is the Supporting Learner Progression Assessment, which is covered in more depth later on in this professional learning session. And the temptation quite often for our practitioners will be to dive straight into the areas of learning and experience and look at the detail of the curriculum. But I think given how different this curriculum is structurally in terms of the way it's designed and been developed, it's really important that we engage our practitioners within the introductory sections to the guidance first. So if we dive into the Introduction to Curriculum for Wales guidance section, what this does is it sets the curriculum into context, and it also explains what guidance is available. For example, here the guidance consists of the Introduction for Wales guidance, the guidance around legislation, so what we have to do in terms of the law once that becomes enacted later this year, designing your curriculum section around some general guidance and general considerations, which we'll look at shortly. The introduction to each area of learning and experience. It talks then about the statements of what matters. So the statements of what matters in this curriculum are the big ideas, the key principles, so the high level concepts in each of the areas of learning and experience. The principles of progression, the 5 principles that are common across all areas of learning and experience. And it's important to have a good understanding of what they are, because this is the way in which we're going to think about and evidence learner progress across the curriculum. The descriptions of learning, which will describe how learners make progress within those 27 what matters statements areas, and then the Designing Your Curriculum guidance within each area of learning experience, and the Supporting Learner Progression Assessment guidance, which sits separately from the AOLE guidance. So this section goes on then to talk about the vision for the school's curriculum and that importance of thinking about perhaps our vision again in light of the 4 purposes. So to what extent is our vision for our school and for learning and for the curriculum underpinned by the 4 purposes, and to what extent do our various stakeholders contribute to that vision? Do we need to revisit that in light of the new curriculum? Then talks a little bit about the curriculum framework. And then in this section around the integrated approach to learning and teaching, we've got some important points about the structure of the curriculum and the philosophy and the ideas that sit behind it. So it's worth considering these in a little bit more detail too. So I think this introductory paragraph is important. The framework is designed to help practitioners develop a more integrated approach to learning. The 6 areas bring together familiar disciplines and encourage strong and meaningful links across different disciplines. Those individual disciplines will still play an important role, especially as learners progress and begin to specialise. So I think there were some misconceptions when the curriculum was first published in draft last summer. Around the role of the disciplines within areas of learning. They still have a very important and prominent role within areas of learning and experience, and the way in which schools decide to organise their curriculum is entirely their choice. What the design does expect, however, is that lots of thought is given to how some of these areas of learning link, what the interdisciplinary connections are, and how they can work across the curriculum so learners can see where things link and join up. Another important statement in this section is this one: the framework does not require schools and settings to develop a timetable expressly structured along the lines of the areas or to organise the setting or school staffing on that basis. So there wouldn't be a requirement, for example, in a secondary school to have humanities timetabled. That could be something that a school decides to do, but what you could do is you could investigate overarching themes within humanities, but still with a disciplinary approach. So there's no prescription around how the curriculum is designed. That's for individual schools to think about and to design in the best interests of the young people who study in those schools. There's some guidance then around designing the curriculum. And there's then some explanation in terms of progression and assessment and the way in which that has been at the heart of the curriculum design here. And this again is quite important because it talks about the relative role of the statements of what matters as the basis of the learner's progression. It talks about the way that the principles of progression are common across the curriculum, and they've been developed within each individual area of learning experience too. And it also then talks about the role of the descriptions of learning, which provide guidance on they progress within the what matters. So it's really important that our teachers understand how the curriculum has been organised and how progression is absolutely central and fundamental to the way that the curriculum has been designed. So this section, a really important read, really important to pick out those key points. If we then are to jump back now, so that's the first bit of the guidance. If we go back now to the home page and look then at the summary of legislation, what this section does is exactly what it says. It provides a summary of what the proposed legislation is going to be. Now, bear in mind that the Curriculum Assessment Bill hasn't yet been passed, but when it is passed, the features that are pointed out through this section will become law. What this section describes is, for example, who the framework applies to, which providers, what the proposed legislative requirements and curriculum requirements will be in terms of the framework. So the purpose of the curriculum being to develop the four purposes, which is a point we've covered already. The general requirements are that it is broad and balanced, is suitable for different ages, aptitudes and abilities, and enables appropriate progression, that learners have the 6 areas of learning and experience are followed, that there are opportunities to develop the 27 statements of what matters across the curriculum, and that the curriculum also has an appropriate provision around the mandatory curriculum elements: religion, values, ethics, relationships, sexuality education, Welsh and English. Also here, the mandatory cross-curricular skills, which have existed obviously for a number of years and are a key feature of this curriculum framework: literacy, numeracy and digital competence. So this section sets all of that detail out in terms of what will become the responsibility of the head teacher and the governing body as we move forward to 2022. There's also a section then around the requirements for funded non-maintained nursery education settings. Also here, requirements for pupil referral units and those providing EOTUS provision. So all of that detail is set out here. And the last section here, in terms of the wider requirements, to what extent is the curriculum underpinned by some of the key policy areas at the moment? So the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, to what extent are we considering things like sustainable development and ways of working through the work that we are doing? And also, obviously, key United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and the ALN Act as well. So all of those things are part of the legislative framework that will be going to the Senedd at some point in 2020.